Hello, everyone. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar on behalf of the TEFL org. My name is Carl. I am a teacher trainer. I'm an online teacher. I'm an English examiner. I work out of my office generally, not always. They do let me out sometimes, but I work out of my office here in Northern Ireland. But I've also been lucky enough to have taught in many places around the world. China, Vietnam, Azerbaijan, Sri Lanka, Japan, Kazakhstan. I taught in Iraq for a bit. I've worked as a senior teacher. I've also worked as a normal teacher, and I've taught lots of different range of types of English as well, from kids all the way to people doing their PhDs. So hopefully I can talk to you today about how to make reading lessons fun, because that's the topic of today's chat. Please say hello if you are joining us. We'd love to know where you are. As I said, I am in Northern Ireland, where I have lived for about the last 6 or 7 years. All my traveling days were way before me on that. So please, yeah, and if you do have any questions at all, please also put them in the chat. I will get round to them after I've done my little presentation where I talk a bit about some of my ideas about reading. Thank you. Right, let's get this presentation up. There we go. Sorry, I should also say that Alan is monitoring the chat, so any links and things like that, Alan will whack them in there for you. All the hellos are coming in. Hi, Joan Via. How you doing? Rick, hi. Celia, how you doing? Thanks everyone for joining in. Right, so making reading lessons fun. First of all, I should say that I quite like teaching reading. You will find the odd teacher that thinks that reading shouldn't be taught in class, that reading is sort of an outside the class type of thing. I really disagree with that myself, because I think actually teaching reading skills is important, and there are lots of different ways to read, and there's lots of different texts where you might read them differently and all that sort of thing. So I really do love teaching reading. I should also throw in there that reading is quite important, especially towards university level. It's also it's one of the key skills that people study when they study for exams. So all of this kind of thing, it does make it quite important, I think, and I do believe you can make it fun. Right. So the first way I believe to make it a bit more engaging and make it a bit more fun, and I should also say, if you please, if you agree or you disagree, you've got anything to add, please do put that in the chat. The first thing that I think is important and is text choice. So basically the type of text that you use in class, the subject of the text, things like the length, all that kind of thing are important. Now, they can make, for kids and for teenagers, getting text that they find interesting, I believe, is quite key. It can be quite tricky. If you've got a class of 30 kids, for example, and you have to find a text that they all like, or they've all got a thing in, it is tricky. You are going to find that you're going to hear students that say, oh, this one's boring, or this is not interesting for me. But in a class of 20, 30 people, of course, there's going to be a few that don't like it, but there's also going to be some that do find it interesting, do like it. So texts in class and the ones you choose can make your class interesting or make it a little bit boring. So what can you use? And I'll put some links on the next slide and on a website where I believe you can get good texts, or you can find texts that you want to look at. Right, so it does depend on the materials that you have available. So if you're going to teach in a school and they give you the lessons, they'll probably give you the text. You can always supplement them, and a good teacher should supplement them. If you're working online, the company might give you some text to use. If you are teaching toward a specific exam, then you would probably just use texts that are materials that would be used in the exam or similar to the exam. What I always say with reading is, can you take text from outside the materials that you have been given? So can you find your own text from websites? Can you find your own text from books? Can you ask other people what text they might have used in their class? Share some text and some activities, that kind of thing. If you can, I think it does make your class a bit more interesting. Also allows you to use more up-to-date texts. Lots of textbooks sort of get out of date almost the moment they're published in terms of the text they use. I remember there's a textbook up here where they talk about celebrities, and when it was published, the celebrity was already sort of out of fashion. So, you know, finding your own text and about that sort of thing can make it a bit more interesting. Another way of putting it onto is to put this onto your student. So get them to choose any sort of text. So within a class, you would probably choose the activity that you're going to use in the class, but you might also allow them to choose their own ones. So how can they find them? And this does depend where you are in the world. Online is one way, and that you could give them one of the links that I'm about to show you. Local libraries. So a school might have its own library, a language school or a school that you're working at, or a university, to various degrees of quantity in terms of number of books. There might also be local libraries in the local area where they can get their own books. You know, that might be something that's not known to them. Likewise, you might work in a place where there's no local libraries, but something to think about. What would be fantastic if you can get your hold of is graded readers. What are graded readers? Graded readers are books that have been edited by different authors to hit a certain level of English. So you'd have beginner lessons. Now they could, for example, take a Charles Dickens book, simplify it to make it elementary level. They could get Romeo and Juliet and put it in an intermediate level. Graded readers, if you can get the hold of them, are great. And there are access to some of these online. Hopefully there are some in the language school that you're going to go work at. So graded readers are good, and if you can get them to do that, that's great. Right, here are some websites to get texts. Now, I'm not going to click on them. I'm not going to talk about each and every one. Some have some positive things, some have negative things. A lot of these are actually put up by people instead of companies. There's sort of people that are trying to, you know, help people to read. But if you're watching this, take a photo of this one, have a little look at them. You know, you could type some of these into Google and that one. Now, I have over the years used One Stop English quite a bit for news stories. Same with Learn English. British Council. They have a good range. These other ones here are good for graded readers, for finding different levels of English. Books that children or adults can read. And this one obviously is quite good for kids. So they're all worth checking out. I'm not saying any of them are perfect, but they are worth checking out. See if you can get some texts off those. Right. So what are the basics of reading in class? So to keep it fun and to keep it interesting, don't overwhelm them with text length. Sometimes teachers feel that they have to, especially at higher levels, have to give quite long texts. That's not necessarily true. It can take up a lot of time in class, can be quite boring. Often longer texts are something that could be given for homework. So don't overwhelm them in text length. It can be quite boring, cannot be that interesting. Timing of activities is important, especially in adult classes. So what do I mean by the timing? So if you're giving an activity, don't give them like an indefinite amount of time to read it and then to find the answers. Don't just say, okay, look, do these questions. There we go. See how you go. Try and think, right, okay, do you know what? You can have a minute a question. You're going to have 2 minutes a question, however many you think it would be. Why is this important? Because especially in adults classes, eventually they're going to take some sort of exam, the majority of people, whether that's a business English exam or an academic English exam or an exam like Trinity or IELTS. And getting students to read quickly is important. Reading quickly is a skill. It's something that needs to be taught at, and given just an indefinite amount of time means you'll have some that finish too quickly, some that finish some slowly, some that don't, some that take the time, some that don't. It's all over the place. Give some time into the activities you're given. Try to ask questions about the text as a whole. So it's very easy to make questions. So you found a text, you like it, you set some questions. Who did this? When was this? What was this? Questions like that are very, very easy to make. What you're trying to also think is using as a text as a whole. So asking questions where you might talk about the summary of the text, asking questions where you might predict the text from the headlines, asking questions where they just look at the headings within a text, or they're skimming, very, very quickly just to try and find the answer to a question. Now, and you might just ask one or two questions that covers the whole of the text. Is it a happy text? Is it a sad text? Where would you find this text? Something like that. Why is that important? Because it's a skill that we use when we're reading. We don't, when we get, for example, when I go on the BBC website, I don't read every single article. What do? I look at the headlines. I sometimes click on them and then I read it. And then I think, okay, do you know what? That actually isn't very interesting to me after I've skimmed it a bit. Teaching that is an important skill. And then you might ask questions about detail. Always do the skimming before the scanning question. So then you ask about detail, who, what, where, that kind of thing. We'll sort those out. Right. How do you read a book to young children to make it exciting, to make it interesting? So firstly, take your time. I have observed lessons, kids' lessons, where the teacher thinks that, you know, when I'm saying here to young children, I'm sort of talking about sort of 7 and under, maybe, where you are physically reading the story to them instead of them actually doing the reading. Take your time. Drag it out a bit if you can. Get them to think about it. Don't just rush through it. Get them to concentrate on the book that you're holding up and reading. Also, if you can, don't have the book with the words facing you. Try and have it at the side like this and pushed out to them so that they can read. Being able to read like this is quite an important skill when you're reading to young children. Take your time. Be enthusiastic. This might be the 10th time that week that you've read a book about a dragon flying to a castle, but be enthusiastic. Wow, look at this. Whoa, put some feeling into it. The dragon took off and the fire burnt the castle. Be enthusiastic, be good, because that will keep them interested. That will keep them infused in your class. Stop and ask them questions about texts. So, you know, ask questions. Oh, where is the dragon going? Does the dragon look happy? Do you think the dragon looks angry? All things like that. What colors can you see on the castle? Getting them involved in the whole text and looking at the pictures to show what the words match and to help them understand the story is really, really important. Get them thinking about the next page. Oh, okay. Oh no, the castle's burnt down. What do you think the king will feel that on the next page? The king will be angry. Yeah, that sort of thing. Get them thinking about it. Get them really interacting with the text. Use the pictures a lot when you're reading to very young children. You know, get them up and pointing at it, something like that. Use, you know, point yourself. Get them, use the pictures. Get them to repeat key words. Okay, can everyone say dragon? Dragon. You know, get them to use it as pronunciation. Get them to show that the key vocabulary that they can take out of it. So these are basically a little bit like questions you would, if you were to give a text, and you would ask a group of adults to answer questions about it. If you can still do that with a small children's book, which has lots of pictures and maybe only 10 to 15 words on a page. Really can be worked out. Right. What are some fun activities you could do with sort of older children or adults to keep them infused? Right. Games. Just because it's a reading lesson does not mean that you can't play games with the text. You can't play games within the lesson. Get the games going. So here are some of my favorite ones. Right. So true or false games. So you can give them 10 questions and answer them true or false. Or you could put them into teams and they have to hold up a true or false thing. First team to do that gets a point. You could write true on one whiteboard over here, and true and false on the other whiteboard over there. They have to run to the side of the room or walk to the side of the room where they think it's correct. That kind of thing can get them thinking about it, can have a little bit more fun with just, instead of just writing down the true or false answer. Draw the story or draw the person. So you've read a story or you've read a news article. as we read, hopefully we've sort of got a picture in our mind what it might be. You might say, okay, guys, in pairs, can you draw the picture? Can you draw the story that you've just done in 3 boxes? Who do you think the main character was? Who's your favorite character? Can you draw what you think they look like? Get them talking about it. And as they're drawing, you're going around asking them questions about the text, all that kind of thing. Vocabulary games. So you can do loads of vocabulary games with text, things like synonym bingo. So you get some synonyms for some keywords in the text. They have to you say the word that's in the text. They have to tick off the synonym. Things like that you can do. You can do Pictionary, you can do charades, you can do taboo. I've done webinars where I talk about these sort of games, play all those where you use words from the text. Rearrange the story. Takes a bit more planning, this one, but once you've done it once, you can use it over and over again. You if you're a great artist, you could draw some pictures of the story as it happens, maybe 4 pictures, condense it into 4 sections. They then have to rearrange the pictures in teams. You then print them off, or you photocopy them, you cut them out, the squares, they have to rearrange them. Then they tell the story as they go after they've read it, that kind of thing. Write their own questions. So you could give them the text and say, right, okay, I want you to write 10 questions about this text. And on the board, you write what, who, where, when. Simple ones like this. Be careful of why. That can be a bit more tricky. But simple things like this. They then write the questions. They then ask the questions to another team. They work in pairs, something like that, to find the information. Just makes it a little bit more different. Makes it a bit more interesting for them. Role plays are great from reading. So after they've read the text, or they've read the story or the news story, whatever it might be, you might get them to act it out. You might get them to act out the next stage. You might get to act out what happened before, that kind of thing. They write a conversation, all that can work. Finish the story. You could give them sort of half the story and then say, right, okay, what do you think will happen? Work with your partner. And then they could finish it. They could write it themselves in a paragraph. They could act it out. And then you give them the other half of the story, and then they try and see if they're the same, if it's similar, something like that. Before and after works pretty well with news stories. For example, you know, what would happen to the person afterwards? What happened to the person? What do you think the person was doing before? That kind of thing makes it it's a little bit more different from who did this, when did this happen, all that kind of thing. Asking them about their opinion about it. You know, what was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? What did you like? What didn't you like? What phrases did you like? Get them thinking a bit more deeply about the text instead of just basic, simple questions. That can work. And having debates about it. Adults especially love having debates. Teenagers enjoy having debates as well, where you could put an opinion up that's related to the story. One half or one group has to agree, one group has to disagree, and they have a bit of time to make it up. Quite advanced, this, but something that can be done. Thank you for everyone that's still saying hello. Please do put your questions in the chat. Flora's in Azerbaijan. Flora, I lived in Baku for a good amount of time. Hi, LinkedIn user who's in Delhi. I think, is that the capital of India? Delhi is the capital of India. I've forgotten that. Celia's in Paris. Hi, how you doing, Celia? Hi, Rick. Hi, Jova. Please do put your questions in the text. In the chat box, they do come through to me. It doesn't have to be about reading. It can be about anything at all. Right. The other way of making reading a bit more interesting is beyond the classroom. So sometimes students prefer to read outside of the classroom. So you might find that in the classroom is a little bit boring for them. They would rather be, you know, talking, speaking, all that kind of thing. I'm not saying don't do any reading, but you might keep it short and then give extended ones outside the classroom. And sometimes students prefer that because they can read at their own pace. They feel like there's less pressure, that kind of thing. I know my daughter at the moment, she's at school and they've just, my daughter's a fantastic reader, probably better than I am. And they've started bringing quizzes into the school about the books, put a bit more pressure on it, tests and that kind of thing. She started to hate reading. I really would rather she didn't do the tests and the exams. She says that tests are boring. She doesn't like reading because you have to do an exam. So just, having fun. Whereas if I just give her a book, if I take her to the library and she finds her own book, she's away, she's having fun. So students sometimes prefer to read outside of the classroom. How can you make it fun? Book clubs are a great way. So you could get them to, go find their own book, or you could, if you can, give them a link from some of those links I gave before to some books, and they find their own book. And you say, right, okay, next week we're going to discuss your book. You're going to say why you thought it was good, why you thought it was bad, give a summary, all that kind of thing. Have a weekly book club. They could do spoken or written reading summaries. So spoken ones, you could say, right, okay, guys, you got your own book, go read this book. And then by next Tuesday, I want you to send me a 1 minute spoken summary about the book, telling me and cover 2 or 3 points that you give them: opinion, summary, recommendation, something like that. Or they could do it writing summary within 100 words, that kind of thing. You could also have some sort of monthly reading challenges. Now, be a bit careful with this because you want quality as well as quantity. So, reading challenges could be the amount of books they've read, could be the amount of questions that they've got correct, or even the amount of homework that they've completed. You could keep a running chart in Excel or something like that, and then you add to it and change it. Thanks for the questions. I'm definitely going to get to them soon. So that's all. That doing beyond the classroom, I think, is really good. Keeping the reading, making sure the reading's fun, basically, out for them as well, not just something boring that happens in class. Other tips, right? It doesn't have to be about stories. I've seen teachers that quite often just go down the route of just giving stories to kids, especially. Kids like to hear about news. My daughter at the moment, as I said, she's 8 years old. She's heard about all the news that's going on around the world at the moment. Her teacher's pretty good at that kind of thing. Students, I think kids like to know about this. Worldwide news could be it could be news stories about your country that you're giving to them to show. Doesn't always have to be about Romeo and Juliet and Charles Dickens and all that kind of thing. Be current, be nice, give them interesting things to read. Use reading to change the pace of a lesson. If you've got a group of kids or who are running around a lot, and you want them to sit down quietly for a bit, reading is a fantastic way to do that. Likewise, reading can be quite tricky if you've got a group of adults who have been working all day and it's a late night class and they're all a bit tired and they're a bit bored and they're yawning. Giving them a text can sometimes not really help. You might want to give that as homework then instead of in the class. I remember in Japan, I had quite a late night class, which used to start at 10 p.m., believe it or not, 10 p.m. till 11 p.m. It was a business English class, and I had Japanese business gentlemen who would start work at sort of 7 in the morning, and then he'd once a week come to my class, which went through till 11 o'clock, keeping his energy level going. It was pretty tricky. So he did fall asleep once. I don't know if that was me or just his lifestyle. Right. Try not to make reading a chore. So don't sort of go, right, do you know what? Now we're going to do some reading because you guys haven't been working very hard. Or you guys have been really badly behaved. So let's do some reading. Try and make them understand that reading is a nice thing and that reading is a good thing. Never use it as a punishment. Don't force difficult books onto them. So within a class, you are going to have students have different ranges of reading. And if you say to them, right, you've got to read this book because this is the sort of book that you someone at your age should be reading, or that kind of thing, or you need to be reading difficult books at your time in order to study abroad, or that kind of thing. If they're having trouble with it, it's much better to ease them into it, and you'd be surprised how quickly students can catch up with reading once they sort of get their momentum going with it. Don't force difficult books onto them. Make allowances for dyslexia. Now, lots of places around the world that I've taught at don't really test children or even adults. I'm dyslexic. So that meant I got extra time in my exams because my reading speed is quite slow. Be aware that some students might not be able to read quickly, and you sort of saying you've got to read more quickly, you've got to do all that kind of thing, you've got to work harder, doesn't really help them. Be aware that there is such a thing as dyslexia. There's loads of good websites about this kind of thing, so just be aware of this, especially I think with coming into the teenage years. I think it's quite important. Right, if you are teaching reading online, and I think this is my last slide or penultimate slide, so please do get any questions in. If you are teaching reading online, use the tools available. So don't necessarily think that it's difficult for you to read for students to read online. People read books on phones, people read books on tablets, people read books on screens. It's a big thing. So just because it's not a paper book that they can't hold doesn't mean that you can't do it. So use tools available, use shared documents, put PDFs, send them PDFs. If you have to, share screens or something like that. Use tools available. And likewise, when you're playing the games, I've talked before about how you can play games online. I've done webinars about that, using the whiteboards and all that kind of thing. Do it. It's still very possible to play games online. Really is. If possible, give them their own link to a text. So what do I mean by that? So if you've got a text that you want to use and you want them to read it yourself, adults or kids, then send them the link and get them to open it themselves. Why is that better than you just sort of showing a document and then you scrolling it up and down? Because they can then read at their own pace. They can go back up a little bit if they need to. People read at different paces, so it's kind of important to be able to do that. If you're teaching quite young kids, which a lot of online classes are, try holding books up to the camera. Don't be afraid to get your book and hold it like that. You might have to cover your face sometimes. You might have to practice pointing at words, all that kind of thing. It takes time. Be patient. Give the camera time to focus. Don't be moving it around all the time. Give your webcam time to focus on the words. Move it in or move it out. I've seen teachers do this effectively. It does work. Use shared documents as well to answer the question, so you can show that they're understanding. Use the breakout rooms. All that kind of thing works well with reading. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. So thank you very much for everybody. Please do put in the chat if you disagreed or you agreed, or you've got any tips about teaching reading at all. Hello, everyone. Hi, Melanie in Llandudno, beautiful part of Wales. David, hi. Is it a good idea to have each student in class read a section of the book aloud, or is this too boring? Here, English. So my English literature class, and looking back at it, what a way to easily make a living. Well, that must have been very boring for the teacher. I remember we were reading Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, which I now hate. And my teacher used to say, right, Carl, read the first page. Da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da, Charles Dickens, poor people, blah, 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 blah. It's not very nice weather, da-di-da-di-da. And it'd be like, Michael, read page 2. And then Michael would take over. And that was our English literature classes. We just carried on like that. If we did Shakespeare, then it's slightly different. Shakespeare, we would, Carl, you're Romeo. Steve, you're Lord Capulet, whatever it might be. And then we wouldn't act it. We would just sit there and read it out. Whoa, that is quite boring. Now, right. There are schools of thought that say that this is a good thing because you can practice your pronunciation whilst you're doing it. You can correct their pronunciation while you're doing it. And you will see people do this. Now, I personally don't like it. And there's a couple of reasons why I don't like it. Firstly, it's not a real world activity. How many times in your life do you get a piece of paper and read out loud what is on the sheet of paper? So everything we do in the classroom should be really linked to a skill that they're going to use in the future. And doing something in the classroom that they might not do in the real world, I think, is a bit pointless. Right. Another reason why I don't like it is you're only correcting one person's pronunciation because only one person is reading it. Really, when you're correcting pronunciation, you should try and do the whole class as a whole. Thirdly, yeah, it is quite boring. And fourthly, it's just the speed. Going back to the speed, if when you read out loud, you probably read a bit more slowly than you do if you're reading just normal text. And doing that is if one person's reading ahead, one person's reading behind, all that kind of thing, it's tricky. Right. What I sometimes do, because some people do ask this, is I sometimes get the students to read out the questions, not the text, read out the questions. So I'd say, Rick, can you read out question 1? True or false, Romeo died? Something like that. Sylvia, can you read out question 2? Where was Romeo and Juliet written? All that kind of thing. I think just gives them an opportunity to get speaking a bit more. But reading them all up individual is not such a good idea. Unfortunately, and I don't think this has happened in the years that we've been doing these webinars, we've only got the one question in. It was a good question, David. So, well done. I do thank you for doing that. If anyone doesn't have any other questions about reading or any other questions about teaching English as a foreign language, then I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending the last half hour with me. If you're watching this not live, please do still get your questions in because I do read these questions. Alan, who works full-time for TEFL.org, also reads these questions, or his marketing team do read the questions. They pass them on. Happy to go and read them. Also, we just want to say that reading is a skill. It's a language learning skill. So the 4 main skills are writing, reading, listening, speaking. And within those 4 main skills, you have different sub-skills. Teaching skills is covered on our Teaching English as a Foreign Language course, the 120-hour course that is on our website, tefl.org. So teaching the skills is, I think, more important than teaching, say, grammar. Because skills are really what get us through our language learning life. And, our materials do talk about how to make them a bit more engaging, how to have fun, and all that kind of thing. If you do have any other questions at all, few ways to get in touch with us. You can send us a message. You can also join our Facebook group. So this is a group on Facebook where lots of teachers ask each other questions. And people help each other out. It's a really lovely little group. TEFLers on the whole are pretty good people. And it's a good way to talk to each other and find out more information. You can also send us a message through our website. You can send us a message through Facebook Messenger and all that kind of thing if you click on the message with us. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do say hello in the chat. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye everyone.